One afternoon, as we were relaxing on the couch, he turned to me with a serious expression. "Emily, I think we need to talk about something important," he said, his voice calm but firm. My heart raced. Was he second-guessing everything? "What is it, Dad?" He took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "I just want to make sure we're clear about what this all means. It's not typical. Most fathers and daughters don't have conversations or interactions like this." I nodded, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "I know. Are you saying you want to stop?" Before I delve into the heart of this story, I want to take a moment to invite you to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support truly means the world to us and fuels our passion for sharing these intimate stories. If you connect with our content, please leave a comment. Every interaction helps us foster a stronger community, and for that, I am incredibly grateful. Stay until the end to fully experience the characters' emotions and the surprising twist. Summer break had descended upon our home, bringing with it an unsettling stillness. My father, David, had just returned from a short trip to visit his brother, only to depart again almost immediately to meet up with an old friend. My mother, meanwhile, I was away on an extended business trip, leaving me like an 18-year-old college student to enjoy the unexpected solitude of our spacious house. With the house to myself for the first time in what felt like forever, I had a rather specific idea of how I wanted to spend my newfound freedom. The moment my father's car turned the corner, I eagerly locked the front door and shed my restrictive clothes, opting for the comfort of my favorite pajamas. The day stretched before me like an open invitation, and I decided to indulge in some well-deserved relaxation. Laptop in hand, a refreshing glass of soda by my side, I settled onto the living room couch, ready to lose myself in the endless stream of online entertainment. My headphones, a trusty barrier against the outside world, allowed me to fully immerse myself in my chosen distractions, including a few websites that were decidedly more adult in nature. Time seemed to evaporate as I clicked through videos and explored various corners of the internet. Lost in my own little world of privacy and pleasure, I completely lost track of time and my surroundings. My father, I assumed, would be out with his friend for hours. But then, a wave of panic crashed over me. Through the muffled soundscape created by my headphones, I faintly registered my father's voice, sharp with disbelief and edged with something I couldn't quite decipher. "Emily, what in heaven's name do you think you're doing?" My blood ran cold. I hadn't even heard him come in. He stood frozen in the doorway. Without another word, he turned and left, the click of the closing door echoing in the sudden silence. I sat there paralyzed by mortification, my mind struggling to process what had just transpired. The shame washed over me in waves, leaving me breathless and unsure of how to react. Finally, with a trembling heart, I forced myself to get up and find him. He was in the living room, his face pale and drawn, his eyes filled with a mixture of discomfort and something akin to pain. "Dad, I'm so incredibly sorry," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't hear you come in. It won't happen again. I promise." He remained silent for a moment, then sighed heavily. "Just, please be more careful, Emily," he finally said, avoiding my gaze as he turned and walked into the kitchen. The rest of the evening was excruciatingly awkward. We barely spoke, each of us retreating to our own corners of the house. The silence punctuated only by the clinking of dishes and the ticking of the clock. After a stilted dinner, I excused myself early, desperate to escape the suffocating tension and find refuge in the privacy of my room. But old habits die hard. Despite the lingering embarrassment from earlier, I found myself drawn back to my usual routine, leaving my door slightly ajar so I could hear when Dad was finished cleaning up. I thought I was being discreet, cautious. What I didn't realize was that my father, driven by a complex mix of emotions, had his own plans. He turned on the kitchen faucet full blast, using the sound of rushing water to mask his movements as he quietly made his way down the hall towards my room. I was deeply absorbed in my own thoughts when I suddenly heard a voice behind me, startling me out of my focus. "Emily, it's okay. Just don't overthink it," my father said softly. I nearly jumped out of my skin, fumbling to close the tabs on my computer screen. His unexpected presence and calm demeanor threw me off balance. He stepped further into the room, his gaze lingering briefly on the screen before meeting mine. "I wanted to apologize for earlier," he began, his voice tinged with hesitation. "I shouldn't have yelled. I overreacted." I blinked, unsure of how to respond. "Dad, I'm so sorry about all of this," I stammered. He raised a hand to stop me. "No, listen, at your age, it's normal to be curious," he said, his tone steady but strained, as though he was forcing himself to say the words. "You're young, and I get it." Embarrassed but wanting to be honest, I nodded. I just didn't think you'd be home so soon. It won't happen again. I promise." For a moment, he simply looked at me, as if trying to understand something deeper. "How often does this happen?" he asked, his tone now more inquisitive than judgmental. I froze, unsure of how to answer. After a pause, I muttered, A lot, I guess. Every day." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Emily, you're not doing anything wrong, but I can't give you privacy every single day just because of this. You'll need to figure out how to manage things when we're both in the house." The conversation left me stunned. I had no idea how to process the new dynamic. It felt like we had crossed an invisible line, stepping into a surreal realm where awkwardness and attempts at understanding collided. Days later, during dinner, he caught me off guard again. "So, have you taken care of yourself today?" I nearly choked on my food. "Dad, seriously!" He raised his hands defensively. "Hey, we said we'd be honest about this. No judgment." I guess," I muttered, staring at my plate, praying for the conversation to end. After dinner, I quickly retreated to my room, eager to escape the discomfort. But a few minutes later, he appeared in my doorway, his usual casual demeanor contrasting with the tension of the moment. "Emily, we need to stop treating this like some forbidden thing," he said firmly. "Let's just talk about it openly, okay?" "Dad, please. I don't think—" "No, hear me out," he interrupted. "Avoiding it is only making things more awkward." His attempt at breaking the tension was well-meaning, but the situation only became more surreal. He sat down, and the evening took a strange, unexpected turn as we struggled to find normalcy in the midst of an extraordinary conversation. The next morning, I woke up feeling as if I were trapped in a dream. The events of the previous day swirled in my mind. Had all of that really happened? Had my father really tried to address something so personal in such an unorthodox way? The situation felt absurd, yet there was an undeniable tension in the air as I sat at my computer later that day, still trying to make sense of it all. I heard the sound of my father returning from a grocery run. His footsteps in the hallway prompted me to close my tabs and pretend to be busy with something innocuous. He peeked into my room, carrying a faint smile. "Hey, lunch will be ready soon," he said casually, as though everything was perfectly normal. I nodded, unsure of how to respond. "Okay, I'll be there in a minute." Lunch was quiet and uneventful, but there was a lingering awkwardness between us. To break the silence, I asked, "Have you heard from Mom? Any idea when she might be coming home?" A shadow crossed his face. "Her trip's been extended?" he replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "I miss her. That single sentence seemed to open a crack in his usually composed demeanor, and I realized just how much he was carrying. Despite the strange new dynamic between us, there was still an underlying tension, a shared awareness that things had shifted. The afternoon passed in relative normalcy. We talked a little more than usual, managing to share a few jokes and light-hearted moments. By evening, we decided to sit down together and watch a couple of episodes of Game of Thrones. It was a small attempt at reclaiming some normalcy in our routine. Later that night, as the house fell silent, I wandered into the living room. The TV beckoned me, and I decided to unwind by watching a movie. I flipped through the options, landing on something familiar and comforting. As the screen flickered to life, I felt a strange sense of freedom, yet also a nagging awareness of the day's earlier events. The living room, once a space of shared family moments, now felt like a stage for something more complex. It was nearly midnight when I finally turned off the TV and headed to bed, my thoughts still tangled. The boundaries of our relationship had been tested, stretched in ways I didn't fully understand. And as much as I tried to push it all to the back of my mind, I knew this was only the beginning of an unspoken shift between us. I had just settled into the couch, scrolling through the movie selections, when my dad emerged from his room. It was almost uncanny, as if he had some sixth sense for these things. "Oh, decided to watch out here tonight?" he asked, sitting down beside me without waiting for an invitation. I shrugged. "Yeah, I wanted a change of scenery." "Next time, call me. I like watching stuff with you," he said, his tone surprisingly casual. "What, always?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. He nodded with a chuckle. "Well, when I'm home, yeah, it's more fun together." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I focused on the TV. After a moment of silence, he glanced at the screen. "Do you like her? That actress?" I hesitated, but nodded. "Yeah, she's great. She was in that movie we watched yesterday. Can you believe she's 47? She looks amazing." 10 years younger than me, Dad said with a grin. "But yeah, she does look great." "Must work out a lot," I added, trying to keep the conversation light. He laughed. "Is that a hint? Should I hit the gym too?" I couldn't help but grin. "Maybe just a little?" I teased, relieved that we could joke about something so trivial after the strange dynamics of the past few days. Suddenly, Dad stood up. "Where are you going?" I called after him. "Hang on," he said, disappearing down the hallway. "I've got something for you. Totally forgot about it." A moment later, he returned, his hands behind his back, his expression playful. "Guess which hand?" he teased. "Right," I said, playing along. He smiled, pleased with my response, and handed me a small package wrapped in a plain black bag. I raised an eyebrow. Curiosity piqued as I began to open it. "What's this?" "I thought you might find it useful," he explained with a sheepish grin. "I don't know. Never used them myself," Dad said with a chuckle as I pulled out the gift. Inside the sleek black bag was a pair of high-quality headphones. I looked up at him, surprised, catching the satisfied grin on his face. "Do you like them, Emily?" "Wow. Yeah." "Dad. These are amazing." "Thank you." I managed, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Go ahead, try them on," he encouraged. I slipped them over my ears, testing their sound quality. They were fantastic, crystal clear and immersive. As I adjusted the fit, I felt a mixture of emotions. A small part of me had been expecting something else, something more extravagant, but the thoughtful nature of the gift spoke volumes. It was practical, yet personal, acknowledging our shared moments without pushing any boundaries. Dad stood up, stretching. Well, that's enough for tonight. Time to get some rest. I'll take care of tidying up here. Good night, Dad, I said, heading to my room. Good night, Emily, he called after me. Lying in bed later that night, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts. It was hard to believe how quickly our relationship had shifted over the past few days. The awkwardness had given way to something else, a strange but comforting understanding. I wondered what the coming days would bring. There was a nervous excitement in the air, an unspoken question about where this new dynamic might lead. Whatever it was, I couldn't deny that our bond had changed, becoming something deeper and more complex than I had ever expected. The next morning, I woke up with a strange mix of anticipation and uncertainty. The events of the past few days had undeniably altered my relationship with Dad, leaving me unsure of how to approach this new dynamic. I made my way to the kitchen, where the smell of fresh coffee greeted me. Dad was already there, flipping pancakes on the stove. He turned with a warm smile, acting as though everything was perfectly normal. Good morning, Emily. Sleep well? Yeah, thanks, I mumbled, still feeling a hint of awkwardness lingering between us. I gestured toward the headphones sitting on the counter. By the way, these are great. Thanks again for them. He nodded, visibly pleased. Glad you like them, figured they might come in handy. We ate breakfast mostly in silence, but it was a comfortable quiet, like the tension from the previous days had started to dissolve. As I finished my coffee, Dad cleared his throat, breaking the stillness. Emily, I've been thinking, maybe we should set a few ground rules about how we handle things moving forward. My face warmed, but I nodded. Okay, that's fair. He leaned back in his chair, his tone thoughtful but firm. First, let's keep this between us. Your mom doesn't need to know about any of this. Agreed. Agreed, I replied, relieved that he felt the same way. Second, he continued, if you're going to use the living room to unwind, just give me a heads up. I'd rather not walk in and surprise you again. That's fair, I said, grateful for his practical approach to what had been a deeply awkward situation. He hesitated for a moment, his voice softening. And lastly, if you ever want to talk about anything at all, I'm here. Okay. You don't have to feel awkward or embarrassed. I looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. Thanks, Dad. I appreciate that. The air between us felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted. While I still didn't fully understand the shift in our relationship, it was clear we were both trying to find a way to move forward. I'm here for you. No judgment, okay? Dad's voice carried a reassuring weight, and I nodded, feeling a wave of appreciation despite the lingering awkwardness of our situation. Whatever adjustments we were making, his effort to be supportive and understanding didn't go unnoticed. Over the next few days, we settled into a new rhythm. I continued my usual activities, but with a newfound sense of comfort, knowing I didn't have to hide or feel ashamed. True to his word, Dad gave me the space I needed, never making me feel embarrassed about my habits or choices. One evening, about a week later, I was in the living room watching a nature documentary on the big screen. It was one of my favorite ways to unwind. A mix of stunning visuals and engaging narration. I'd let Dad know ahead of time that I'd be using the TV, so I wasn't expecting any interruptions. To my surprise, he joined me on the couch, a glass of wine in hand. Mind if I watch with you? He asked casually, nodding toward the screen. Sure, if you want, I replied, trying to appear nonchalant, despite feeling a little self-conscious about sharing my private downtime. We sat in companionable silence for a while, the soothing voice of the narrator filling the room as breathtaking shots of the Serengeti unfolded on the screen. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Dad's reactions, an occasional nod of interest. A quiet chuckle at a particularly clever bit of narration, and the slow, rhythmic sipping of his wine. "That's incredible," he commented at one point, motioning toward the lioness prowling across the savannah. "Look at her, so strong and graceful." I smiled, sensing his genuine interest. "Yeah, she's amazing. It's incredible how they work together when hunting." He nodded thoughtfully. "What do you think draws you to this? The beauty? The danger?" I paused, caught off guard by the question. "I guess it's a little of both," I admitted. "There's something captivating about how raw and real it all feels. No filters, no pretenses, just life happening in its purest form." "That's a good way to put it," he said, taking another sip of his wine. "It's a good reminder Corey's too. Sometimes we get so wrapped up in our own heads that we forget to just experience things as they are." The conversation felt natural, a stark contrast to the tension of the past week. For the first time in days, I felt like we were connecting on a deeper level, sharing thoughts and perspectives without judgment or discomfort. As the documentary continued, I found myself relaxing more, grateful for this unexpected moment of bonding. Whatever challenges the past week had brought, it felt like we were finally starting to find our way forward, together. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. Well, I guess I like her confidence and, her style," I said, choosing my words carefully. Dad chuckled, sipping his wine. "I can see that. You know, I used to have a lot of confidence in my style too. Back when I was younger." I glanced at him, surprised by his candor. "You still look great, Dad," I said, feeling a bit awkward complimenting him in this context. He smiled, clearly pleased by the remark. "Thanks, Emily. That's sweet of you to say." As the video played on, I found myself increasingly distracted, not by the content on the screen, but by the strange sense of openness we were sharing. The new dynamic between us was both unsettling and oddly freeing, though I wasn't entirely sure how to navigate it, sensing my unease. Dad leaned back and said, "Hey, remember, no pressure. If there's ever anything you want to talk about, I'm here." His tone was reassuring, but the moment felt surreal. "Thanks, Dad," I muttered, glancing at him. He nodded. "Look, everyone has their own way of finding confidence and relaxing. The important thing is not to let it make you feel ashamed or self-conscious." I shifted uncomfortably on the couch, trying to process his words. This whole experience, this new understanding between us, was unlike anything I'd expected. But at the same time, it wasn't as uncomfortable as I had feared. As we sat there, Dad offered a few pieces of advice, not in a patronizing way, but in a genuine effort to be helpful. His voice was calm, his manner encouraging. "You don't have to rush anything in life," he said. "Sometimes slowing down and just understanding what makes you happy can be the best thing you can do for yourself." I nodded, taking in his words. While the situation still felt unconventional, there was no denying that his intent came from a place of care. The evening ended on a surprisingly light note, with Dad cracking a few jokes about his own awkward teenage years, which made us both laugh. As I headed to bed that night, I realized that, strange as it was, our relationship had shifted into a new realm of honesty, one that, while unconventional, seemed rooted in mutual respect and understanding. With a muffled sigh, I leaned back on the couch, feeling a sense of relief and calm after our candid conversation. Dad handed me a tissue box, a small, reassuring smile on his face. "Feeling better?" he asked softly. I nodded, still avoiding his gaze. "Yeah, thanks." He gave my shoulder a supportive pat. "Good. I'm glad you're taking this time to figure things out. Now, why don't you freshen up while I start dinner?" "Sure," I muttered, heading toward the bathroom. My mind was spinning. The openness we were sharing felt both freeing and deeply confusing. How had our relationship shifted so dramatically in just a few weeks? And where could we possibly go from here? Over the following weeks, our unconventional dynamic continued to evolve. Dad became more involved in my daily life, offering advice and, at times, sitting down with me to discuss things I had previously kept private. His supportive presence, while unusual, provided a strange sense of comfort. One afternoon, as we were relaxing on the couch, he turned to me with a serious expression. "Emily, I think we need to talk about something important," he said, his voice calm but firm. My heart raced. Was he second-guessing everything? "What is it?" "Dad." He took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "I just want to make sure we're clear about what this all means. It's not typical. Most fathers and daughters don't have conversations or interactions like this." I nodded, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "I know. Are you saying you want to stop?" To my surprise, he shook his head. "No, that's not it. I just want to make sure you understand that while this might feel unusual, it doesn't change who we are to each other. I'm still your father, and I love you as my daughter. This is just my way of supporting you through a confusing time in your life." His words, while reassuring, left me feeling conflicted. "I understand, Dad, I love you too, and I really appreciate your support. But why are you okay with this? Most parents wouldn't be." He paused, considering his response carefully. "I suppose it's because I trust you, Emily," he said finally. "And I know you're navigating things in your own way. I just want to be someone you can rely on, someone who doesn't judge or make things harder for you." His answer left me with a strange sense of gratitude and clarity. Whatever challenges this new chapter brought, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't facing them alone. "It's because I remember how confusing and overwhelming these feelings can be at your age," Dad said, his voice steady and reflective. "When I was your age, I didn't have anyone to guide me, and I made plenty of poor choices because of it. I want something better for you, Emily. I want you to feel comfortable with who you are and to understand yourself without feeling shame or secrecy." His honesty struck a chord. I looked at him, feeling a surge of gratitude. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot to me." He smiled warmly and pulled me into a brief and supportive hug. "You're welcome, sweetheart. Now, how about we watch something a little lighter tonight? I heard there's a new nature documentary on Netflix." Relieved by the shift in tone, I nodded eagerly. "That sounds perfect." As we settled onto the couch and started the documentary, I couldn't help but feel a deep appreciation for my father. Despite the unconventional nature of our recent conversations, his motivations were clear. His actions came from a place of care and a genuine desire to support me in a way he never experienced himself. The weeks passed quickly, and before I knew it, it was nearly time for Mom to return from her business trip. Dad and I both understood that the unique openness we had shared would likely need to change once she was back. The night before her return, Dad knocked on my bedroom door. "Emily, can we talk for a minute?" I nodded, setting aside the book I had been reading. "Sure. Dad, what's up?" He sat on the edge of my bed, his expression serious but kind. "Your mom comes home tomorrow, and things will probably go back to normal. I just wanted to check in with you and see how you're feeling about everything." I paused, considering his question carefully. The past few weeks had been transformative in many ways. Challenging, yes, but also strangely liberating. "I'm okay, Dad," I said softly. "I mean, I'll miss how open we've been with each other, but I understand that things need to shift with Mom coming back." He nodded, a look of relief crossing his face. "I'm glad you understand, Emily. I want you to know how proud I am of you. Over the past few weeks, I've seen you grow and mature so much. I hope that our talks and everything we've shared have helped you in some way. They have. Dad, I assured him. More than you probably realize. Thank you for being there for me. His expression softened as he leaned in and kissed my forehead, something he hadn't done in years. You're welcome, sweetheart. And remember, even though this part of our relationship might change, I'm always here for you, no matter what. As he stood to leave, I called out, Dad? He turned back. Yeah. Emily? I love you, I said, my voice steady. A warm smile spread across his face. I love you too, honey, always. The next day, Mom returned, and the dynamics of our household shifted back to what they had been before. Yet, something between Dad and me had undeniably changed. We now shared an unspoken bond, a connection built on trust, openness, an understanding that went beyond a typical father-daughter relationship. In the years that followed, I often reflected on that summer. While some might view it as unconventional, for me, it was a time of immense growth and self-discovery. Dad's unorthodox approach had provided me with a confidence and self-awareness that many of my peers seemed to lack. As I navigated relationships, independence, and my own identity in college and beyond, I carried with me the lessons he had taught me. His openness, patience, and unconditional support shaped me in ways I was only beginning to fully appreciate. Though we never spoke directly about that summer again, it remained a quiet chapter in our shared history, a moment in time that brought us closer while teaching invaluable lessons about love, trust, and self-acceptance. Looking back, I realized that what might have seemed unusual to others had been, for us, a profound expression of a father's love and a daughter's trust. It was a summer that changed everything, yet in its own way, but changed nothing at all. Changed